if you see the technology advancements between for example, the 90s and the 2000s and the 2000s and 2010 and 2010 to 2025 is just exponentially growing. And then every single year there's new technology coming. There are new things coming all over the place.
Welcome to the Tourism AI podcast, where we talk about everything at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. Today, we are starting season three. I'm really excited, and we have joining us today Kendel, who works at Tourism AI Network, and Juan, who works at Tourism AI Network, and myself, of course, as your host. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about our upbringing when it comes to technology. So this episode kind of came out of a conversation yesterday, actually, internally, where I talked about the fact that I grew up analog. So just for context, I'm working on my 2025 keynote presentation, which is AI Made Simple, Unlocking Tourism's Next Frontier. And kind of the way I'm framing that presentation is I'm kind of telling a story about myself, because what I've noticed as I've been going out and speaking to different audiences and different people about AI in tourism is that most of the people I speak to are my age or older, and most of the people I speak to are leaders of organizations. And honestly, they spend most of their time out talking to people, out solving problems. They spend very little time at their computers. And so I thought, you know what? I'm actually not unlike them. I'm not a tech bro. That's one of my slides. But I have some techie people that work for me, some smart people from younger generations that grew up pretty digital. And so I thought, let's have this conversation today just about talking about different generations in the workforce and how we all kind of grew up with technology and what that means in terms of our AI adoption, process. And yeah, we'll kind of take it from there. So I'm going to maybe just kick off first by saying, hi, I'm Peter. I'm a Gen Xer and I grew up super, super analog. Kendel, who are you and how did you grow up?
Yeah, so like Peter said, I'm Kendall and I'm a millennial. So I feel like, even though we're in different generations, Peter, we're not too far in age. So like you, I grew up analog, but my family was an early adopter. We did get a computer when I was, in the eighth grade. So I was searching the encyclopedia as my first intro to a computer. And yeah, so kind of at this junction of grew up as a child without, and then had to learn how to adopt multiple different technologies over the years until this point. Yeah.
Nice. And Juan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about your digital upbringing?
Well, as you said, I'm Juan. I'm a Gen Z. So, I've been using computers I have, since I was like, what, 8 old. So yeah, for me, it's kind of like I had the analog part of growing up without like an iPad and things like that and just playing outside. But at the same time, using like the whole time using a computer for everything, uh, during school, during university, during everything. So yeah, it's my life.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about AI adoption, obviously from different generational viewpoints. And so I want to maybe first, I'm going to just kind of walk through a little bit about the slides I'm preparing for context. And so, the slides I'm preparing for my new 2025 presentation is all about really what I'm calling the leader's dilemma. And so I call it the leader's dilemma because at the end of the day, most people who are leading tourism organizations, destinations are probably, like I said, my age, not spending a lot of time on computers, leading, busy, all the things. But they have people more of Juan and Kendall's age or younger who are like doing a lot of amazing things using technology, honestly, and like blowing our minds a little bit. But the dilemma is the fact that while all of that is happening and the AI revolution is happening and things are changing very quickly, as leaders, we actually need to make sure we're leading through this revolution and we're not, one, being left behind, but also two, that we can apply our experience in business and in leadership to actually help guide the path of our younger employees in terms of not doing risky things and right? How to go beyond the digital and also be analog because, in tourism, we still have to be analog when we deal with people on a daily basis and we're doing tours and all the things that we do in tourism, right? And so we're really in this kind of, obviously the different generations, things are blending. And I think that all of our generations have a lot to offer the different different aspects of AI adoption, I guess. So, Juan, maybe before we sort of dive into the topic a little bit, I know you did a little bit of research in preparation for today's session. So, why don't you kind of go through what you found out with respect to the different generations and technology adoption?
Well, it's increasing. I wasn't expecting the numbers that I got. So basically, we know that Gen Z is the biggest user of these new technologies AI in the AI adoption, and we're talking about like as 2024, different surveys indicated that 85% of Gen Z uh, workers were using AI tools at work. Then, if we move to the millennials into the same survey, we have 78% of them using AI tools in their professional tasking. And then for the Gen X, it's still a 76%, which is more than I was expecting. Like we are adopting really quickly. And that said, I would like to add that is like it's something of the user-friendly technology that we're looking nowadays. Is like every single tool is made to be user-friendly, so everyone can be like using it and it's accessible to them. So that's a really cool part of it.
Yeah. And I think the important question to ask though is, and I ask this at all the conferences that I speak at, is like, what does use AI actually mean, right? So I think when me as a Gen Xer uses AI, and even Kendall as a late millennial, we'll just call her, just kidding. As we use AI at work, we probably use it a little quite differently from you on. Well, I know that I use it differently from you because I learn from you every single day, right? And so like so the term use AI, I think when you do these surveys and we're sort of asking people these questions, it means a lot of different things to a lot of people, right? And so, it's like AI first versus sort of like just trying to use AI and struggling my way through it versus like being super systematic about it. It's pretty diverse. So I'm gonna maybe start with you, Kenny. Put you on the spot a little bit. Maybe why don't you describe kind of your AI journey so far? Prior to
Mhm.
coming to Tourism AI Network. Obviously, things have been changing since you got here, but maybe
Mhm.
kind of walk us through your experience. Let's go with technology, but also then AI and kind of what use AI would mean to you.
Right. Yeah, so like I said, our family was kind of an early adopter with computers. I feel like I was the first one out of my friend group to get a computer. I've always been someone who, like, if something new comes out, I want to learn how to use it right away. I kind of want to be like leading in that. So when AI came out, or when it was like more generally known about, I think it was like 2022. I kind of jumped on the bandwagon right away and was really eager to, at my former job, like embrace it and kind of like, why don't we become the leaders on how to use this? But even at that point, I would say, especially when it's not being fully embraced by leadership, for example, it makes it hard to really dig in to it, especially in a work atmosphere, I would say. So a lot more of my journey was more on the personal side, kind of using it where I could with work without it taking on too much. And of course, now in this new role, I feel like I'm fully embracing it and using it to help in all aspects of my job. And like you said, learning from both of you. And just like it's really interesting to be, I guess, a millennial right now because I feel like, we're kind of explaining to Gen X and boomers like, no, it's not going to steal your job. But then to like the Gen Zs, it's like, well, you can't use it for your whole job. You know what I mean? Because we grew up in a way that we didn't have this to help us. So I look back at some of like the reports and emails that I've written in the past. And I'm like, I wrote that on my own. I didn't have AI to help me write that. That was really good. Like my brain worked really well. Um, and so I think about from like a younger generation, as they're moving into the workforce and they have this tool at their disposal, just how that has changed the way people work in the different generations. So I feel really like grateful to be the generation that I'm at, where I have had the experience of not using it, and now being able to integrate it into my work. So yeah, that's kind of my journey right now.
Nice. Juan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, I guess technology kind of from being a kid to where you are today and how it's evolving.
Damn, that's a long answer for that question, but I'm gonna keep it short. So basically, I've been using a computer since I was a kiddo. Like I barely had that contact of like I had to go to the library to find some resources. I had like Wikipedia and like, those early websites to do all of the things that I was supposed to do for school and things like that. And then as technology was evolving, like I was just keeping the pace. And as Kenny, I'm someone that if something comes out, I like to be on top of the new technologies, on top of what's new and everything else. And added to that is the fact of I'm a fan of efficiency. So I found on these new technologies, new ways to do automations to make more efficiency to free up time. And in this part of like using AI, probably said that one of the early adopters of the AI technologies. But at the very beginning, I was, as a lot of the Gen Zs are right now, is I was using it by myself, my personal tools, to improve my output quality on my work. But it was just more like a hiding AI usage instead of like, hey, this is something that we can use. And now I feel that that's something that's shifting away, and people is like leadership is aware that AI is there. So we have those kind of cross-functional teams where like leadership meets the young people that uses these tools, and they're like, hey, let's work together, let's free up time, or let's see what these tools can do instead of like hiding that you're using AI to free up your time to do some other stuff, or the way that I did it at the very, very, very early days of AI. So now I'm in the place of like, I do use AI for almost everything, and I'm exploring other tools and other automations that I can apply to my life in general, not only in my work. So, as one of the examples that we have been talking about, like I've been mentioning a lot, is the Roomba robot, which is like freeing up my time while it cleans for me, right? So, mixing that with different automations, with different triggering and actions, it's like, hey, just tell one of my assistants, like Siri or something like that, or like Google, like, hey Siri, just clean the house, and the robot starts cleaning instead of me going and things like that. So that frees up time, and that's kind of like the point of technology where I'm right now. And yeah, I just love it. Sometimes this is kind of scary because it's kind of like, what if it disappears? And you both have heard me saying like, if it disappears, of like if we don't have internet in one day I'm gonna get crazy because it's like you know my whole thing. Yeah, it's gonna be hard if that thing happens.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think I'm glad that you brought up what I call shadow AI use, which is really, employees using AI and hiding their AI use because they're afraid that either their employer is going to tell them they're not allowed and they really like using the tools, or they're going to feel like, you know, their employers think they're cheating or something along those lines. And I actually think that's the worst possible scenario in any business. And so I think, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is because our Gen X or baby boomer leaders really need to get on top of this and need to, again, lead, need to kind of give permission, need to set the guardrails, right? Sort of set the parameters, develop responsible AI use policies and principles, right? So so that they can actually unleash their employees who are begging, their younger employees are begging to use these tools or using these tools. And again, when it comes to shadow AI use, there's a lot of things that could be happening. For example, if one thinks that he's not allowed to use AI at work, or if I say that he's not allowed to use AI at work, well, he might use it on his personal computer. Now he's bringing files into his personal computer or on his personal devices. Much, much worse than any other scenario, right? So I think it's a really important topic, and why I'm going to keep banging in 2025 and onward to all my fellow Xers and the boomers out there on why they need to get on top of this. So I'm going to share my little story about technology adoption. It's very different from yours in the sense of, I think it was maybe grade 10 where we had our first like introduction to like typing class on a computer, and there was no internet at the time, so we were just typing into a computer. So it was like like early word processors. My first experience with a computer was an Apple IIe, and it was honestly the most underwhelming thing ever that I've ever experienced in my life. It was horrible. I hated it. I'm not a coder. I'm not a tech bro is my new face for 2025. But so, I wasn't one of these people that saw coding and got excited about the future of the world and became a coder and a tech guy, right? I saw this stuff and I was like, wow, that is a lot of work for not a lot of output and a lot of value. And then the internet came, and I remember distinctly a story. So the internet came and it was, really slow at first, dial up. And my mom couldn't be on the phone because my mom loved talking on the phone with her friends
Mm.
all the time. So it was like either somebody was on the internet or somebody was on the phone. Couldn't do both. So it was like this like whole fight in my family. And then we got high-speed internet in Canada, which was awesome. And I actually went on a trip to Poland to visit my family. And I remember they still had dial-up in Poland. And I was like using the computer, like the internet to try to like, email my parents or whatever I was doing. And I remember like the experience of going back to dial-up because like Poland wasn't there yet. And I was like, my God, this is the worst experience ever. Like, I can't believe it. And I was telling them about high-speed internet and they couldn't believe it. Like, they were like, there's no way. That's impossible. It's never going to happen. And I was like, it's already happening in North America. So anyways, and then my my first job out of university, so I had, obviously things evolved, and then I got a BlackBerry, and I was like
Mm.
the coolest dude ever with a BlackBerry on my waist, super cool. Like that was that guy, right? So I literally probably went through every evolution of this technology from kind of my, late teens kind of into where I am now. And so, and the story I want to tell the, Gen Xers and boomers out there that are like me, that didn't sort of look at coding and get excited and think that this is going to change the world is that as these technologies evolve, every single evolution actually makes the technology easier to use, right? So like when we went from regular phones to Blackberries to smartphones, we just learned how to use them. We just evolved and they're getting better and better, right? I remember I had a fax machine. We had a fax machine in my dad's business, and then now we have Zoom meetings. So the point I'm trying to make, actually, the encouraging point to my fellow older generations is that um, actually this technology is making it easier and easier to adapt. So even though it's overwhelming right now and there's lots going on and there's lots of noise and it's scary and I don't know where to start and all this kind of stuff, actually it's awesome because now we have like tools that you could just talk into and you can have a conversation with and then they can do
Mm.
things for you. So it's actually pretty remarkable, to be honest with you. And it's interesting one when you're talking about you were around 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever when you started playing with computers. Well, my kids are 8, and so I'm like kind of like going through this now as a father with them. And my kid loves to ask ChatGPT to make pictures for him, or you know what I mean, or like they're it's just like they're already at age 8. They just
Mhm.
are using natural language to talk to an AI system, which is just like crazy, right? So I'm curious though, from your perspectives, maybe Juan will start with you. So like, as a Gen X kind of growing up, having really used, or sorry, not Gen X, sorry, a Gen Z growing up, having used technology your whole life and seeing what's happening in the AI space, are you concerned about anything? Are you concerned about the inability to think critically, or you know what I mean? Is this gonna make us stupid, or like, kind of give us your perspective on any concerns you might have?
Well, yeah, like I'm not concerned on the side of like, hey, we're gonna get out of jobs and AI is gonna take our jobs and things like that because it's not something that is gonna happen if you don't if you don't let it happen. So you have to, start jumping into the trends and just get into the train and adapt yourself to be able to use AI into your job. Because if not, you're gonna be like, hey, the train is gonna pass and then you're gonna stay there, right? But for the generational side, I feel that there's a little bit of over reliance on these kind of tools. Me personally, I gotta say, like I'm sometimes just, not doing different tasks just for the matter of like, hey, I have an AI that I can talk to. So it's just like kind of the thing of like, hey, stop and think about it. And it's like, it's something that you can do. You don't need to rely on something else and talk to it. I know that it's easier for me to go and say like, hey, Siri, what's, like if I have $1,000 and I'm gonna get like 234 more, how much I'm gonna get or something like that, like those little things that it's gonna come up with an answer instead of like me sitting for an extra 10 seconds to think about it. That's something that like I'm aware of and I try to be aware of, even like I forget sometimes. But I feel that in the future, the over reliance is going to make us a little bit, less good in the critical thinking of way of things. So if you're doing math exercises or just general questioning, is like, hey, you shouldn't rely on that. And that's something that is happening. And it's I'm not the only one that's getting that. And of course, younger generations are going to get that more and more because they're going to be they already have phones at age 8 for example. Like instead of me when I was 8, it was like a big old computer, like the dinosaur with big monitors and things like that. But now it's like it's on your hand or even on your wrist. It's, like over reliance is going to kill a little bit the critical thinking. Let's see. I think that's something that may happen, may not, but it's just a matter of being aware. And you, as parents, I guess, that you're gonna see that in the future is more like a thing of like, hey, be aware of what's your kiddo asking to these AI tools, and if it's something that you feel that they're gonna be able to do by themselves, it's like, hey, do it. Like, hey, like you can do it. You don't need AI to do it for you.
Yeah, it's hard for me to believe that it's possible that humans can get more intellectually lazy than they are right now, but that is certainly a concern that I have as well, and it's something that we really need to work on because I agree with you on like we got to be careful to protect our critical thinking ability. I think it's actually probably the most important skill going forward. I tell people in presentations all the time that discernment is actually probably the most important skill of the future in the sense of yeah, tools are going to tell you things, but you need to have the ability to discern whether they're telling you the truth, whether they're hallucinating, right? So I actually think that I personally think there's going to be like a resurgence of deep knowledge by humans because humans are going to be the ones that have to like oversee AI tools. And you have to know something about something in order to know whether the AI tool is telling you accurate information, right? So that's kind of, we'll see where that goes. But Kenny, I'm wondering from you, any concerns that you have kind of about these tools and what they might do to your
Mm-hmm.
generation?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and I'll just speak for me personally, is that if anything, I think it's made me like second guess myself more. So, I mean, I love it. I think there's so many positives it brings. But I will say, if I'm working on something, it's like, I wonder if it could be better. Like, I wonder if I could have done a better job on this. I wonder if I could have written it better. And something that I like love coming from a marketing background, like one of the tasks that I love doing is media planning. So I get a budget from a client, we're planning a campaign. I have to like find those niche audiences and like strategize an ad buy. And I like love building those out, and I love being able to do the research and look into those things. And now I'm finding like, okay, maybe is this the right spend? And maybe I should ask AI if they have any recommendations for improvements. Which on one hand is great because it might catch something I missed or give me some other ideas. But again, it's like taking that thing that I really enjoy doing and makes me kind of question if I'm doing it as good as I could be. So
Right.
there's that
Yeah.
side of it too. And then just, I think, managing expectations as well, because, we have these tools that can help us be more efficient. So I feel like we're actually taking on more work than ever, like as a society, because we all have these assistants now. But, still, I think building in that space and time for, you talk about it a lot, being the human in the loop. Like it's still important for us to have that time. But if we're taking on more work than ever because we have these assistants, I think like I hope that as a society, we're not losing that space where we still can spend that little bit of extra time doing the things that we enjoy doing, or just having the time to like, yeah, be that human to read through things, right?
Yeah.
So I guess like just from my perspective, like in a work setting, that's my concern. And then just to reiterate what Juan said too, like as someone with young children that are already very curious, my 4-year-old, she'll say, "Can I talk to the robot today?" And she'll walk around with ChatGPT. Yesterday, she's like notoriously super messy. She has the messiest room at all times. I heard her take ChatGPT into her bedroom and say, "How can I clean my messy room quickly?" And so it just made me laugh so hard because, like you're saying, they're growing up with this technology. So what does that mean? What does that look like? It's going to be a completely different landscape. And so, I like some of the tips you said there. One, it's like getting them to take a pause and
Yeah.
question if they really need to ask the robot for an answer to this, right?
The question
Yeah.
is just do the work and pick up your damn clothes, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. It's really good that she did that. Like, that's a good question, and that's a good way to start like critical thinking in terms of like, hey, she had the idea of like, I want to clean my room and things like that. So that's good.
Yeah.
Um, that's amazing. I
She didn't
I, I
she
gotta
didn't do
say,
it, by the way. She didn't clean her room. So I'll just say that.
She
she was
knows the
just
intelligence told her what she should do, but that doesn't mean she did do it, right?
Right?
we're gonna get to a point that she's gonna ask a robot to do it. But yeah, that's another thing. But one of the things that you mentioned there is like be the human in the loop. So one of my, let's call it my internal battles in that kind of way is like I've been trying to personally to catch up more with my friends because I'm not a big time texter. And then I've been looking for some ways of like, hey, these tools have my personality. They know the way that I write messages. They know that I write messages with sometimes with a messy English because it's my second language, you know? So I was like, hey, I can just give a list to these tools and then like these are my friends, just, an automation of like checking with them every now and then come back with like, hey, this is what I would talk with your friends. But at the same time, like it's not something that I'm doing. It's something that
Right.
like so I didn't started developing that because it's like as long as I want to be a good friend, I'm not doing it. I'm letting a machine do it for me, and then they're gonna be thinking that they're like they talk to me, they chatted with me, and I was like like that's kind of the over reliance that we're talking about. Like I'm not gonna be the human there, and then what I'm gonna get on my mind, like on my thought process, it was like I'm gonna get a really long big message of like, oh, Peter said that, and Peter said that his family is doing well, and Kenny is planning a trip to somewhere, and blah blah blah, right? So I'm on the loop, but they're not chatting with me; they're chatting with machines. So that's kind of like the finding that balance between of machine and your human touch and like being productive, being better, being a better friend, but at the same time like I'm not a good friend if I'm letting an AI chat for me. So that's kind of a thing that I'm gonna throw you like there. Like imagine like you can be thinking that you're chatting with me, but it's like just my AI, and then I'm just doing something completely different.
I guess on the positive side, the AI won't judge or express its opinion. It'll just listen nicely and give you good responses. I'm just kidding. No, you do actually raise a couple interesting points that I wanted to talk about. First of all, in tourism, especially, I think that finding that balance between the human interaction and the machine interaction is like really, I think, something the entire industry really needs to sort of tackle and understand. And right, it's like obviously tourism is a very human centric industry, right? And so like we certainly don't want to over rely on the AIs to do the work that humans do, but at the same time, the ability to have 24/7 support and be able to answer people's questions in multiple languages, and like there's so many benefits, right? So like finding those cost benefits is really going to be, I think, the central thing for the tourism industry to kind of tackle. You also mentioned something, one that I actually was going to be my next set of questions, so I'm going to go back to you on this, but obviously you're I don't know. Actually, my question to you, number one, is are you amongst your friends group the most down the AI rabbit hole, or are all your friends there? And then two, the second question is, what is the chatter in your sort of peer group around this technology? What are people saying? What are the conversations? How are people feeling about it?
Well, I gotta say that I'm really deep down in the rabbit hole of AI.
Yes, I know.
Like, like I'm really deep down. But if I keep it to a like not that deep level conversation with my friends, I know that everyone has used ChatGPT. There have been some times that we're like just hanging around and we have a question, and then instead of Googling it, they chat GPT it. It's kind of a thing that is like around us. I have friends with different backgrounds and things like that. So their opinion is not like too deep into what's going to happen and things like that. It's more like the impressive things that you can get with those kind of tools. They're like, oh, that's amazing. Oh, it's incredible that it did that and things like that. And because I'm like the one of the group that is deep dive into this, I'm the one that is showing them more and more stuff. And they're like, wow, this is something incredible. um, and when we talk about like a deep level conversation in terms of automations and things like that, is one friend once one time said when we were talking about automation, she said literally, "You're getting paid to build something that is gonna do the work for you." And I was like, "Yeah." And he asked me like, "What's the next thing that is gonna happen?" I'm like, "Dude, I know how to build this thing, so I'm on the safe spot of like, hey, we can't keep building." And that's when I come back to my train idea of like jump into the train, because if you know how to do this, you're going to be safe. But if you let the train go, there's nothing you can do, right? Like, and it's not only with AI. There are a lot of different examples in the world that you can use of on that like analysis. And then other thing is in terms of like chatting with my friends and chatting with leaders like you, there's a huge difference. And then we have still the wow factor in terms of like, oh, this is amazing. Those are amazing things that we can do with AI. But one of the things basically get from it is I'm on the AI side and things like that, but you have the hands-on experience. So for the older generations that have been there and that have been exploring those kind of things, and like have the experience on decision making on though, like all of the stuff that involves experience, it's important because like that's something that I can get from you. Like I can get the experience and throw it to the AI. I know how to talk to the AI. You have the experience, so if we combine both, there you go. We have a perfect output. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the complementary thing that I get from it instead of like, when we're talking with friends, it's just like a kind of like same level conversation because we kind of share the same age. But when we talk about like getting input from someone that has more experience than you, it's just, it's just a better output. It's just a better combination in terms of like the output that you're gonna get.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then
I
that
love
they're
that.
not have
I'm gonna
like
give a
the
shout
only
out one. Sorry, I'm gonna give a shout
yeah.
out to my old boss, Doug Griffiths, who wrote a book called 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. He's a rural economic development kind of guy, president of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce now. But in his book, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, he talks about sort of the imagine in these rural small communities if you had all these like seniors and all these old people that are sort of withering away in seniors homes, and these young people who are moving away because there's nothing to do. Imagine if you brought
Mhm.
those people together to learn from each other and collaborate, what that could do to revive your community. And I think actually what you're saying there, Juan, is really interesting in the sense of I actually think AI is such a great opportunity for businesses because we're all going to be transforming our businesses. We're all going to be rethinking our businesses from the ground up. So the opportunity to bring in the experienced Gen Xers and the with the younger generations and to really think through how to do this is a really awesome opportunity to really learn from each other.
Mhm.
And I think companies that do that well, I think are going to succeed really well. So I think
Mhm.
thanks for raising that.
Mhm.
Kenny, wondering what your peer group is saying about all of this crazy world we're living in.
Yeah, I mean, I think my peer group in talking with them, everyone's using AI for something in their work. I would say at almost still like an introductory level. Like no one has a custom GPT or would know how to build that. So though it's being fully embraced, I would say it's not being utilized to its full potential. But just going back to what you guys were just talking about there, I think just to add to that, I think that the younger generations, like they know how to prompt very well. Like they know how to get what they need from the systems. I feel like when our generation started off using it, or like me, it's like, dear ChatGPT, could you please, if you don't mind, like do this thing? But like you're saying now, like bringing in the older, you have the strategic knowledge in the background, so you know the output that you want to see from it. So working with the Gen Z on like prompting and making sure that the tools have the information they need to get that output. It's so important to have those two generations working together, right? Because otherwise you're not talking about it, then you're not going to get the output that you need, right? So yeah, I think it's interesting though that, like I said, I would love every time I talk to my friends about what I'm doing with work, it's like, oh my God, like you're doing that. Can show me how to do that? So I think there's definitely desire. Most of my friend groups, there's a lot of desire. They want to learn how to do more. But again, it comes back to time. It comes back to leadership in their organizations. So talking back to the leadership, like having that leadership buy-in is integral because if you are being encouraged to use it with managing expectations. So leaders also can't think it's a magic wand, right? There's going to be like a lot of work that needs to go into developing the tools, the prompting, the outputs. But I think with a bit more leadership buy-in at that top level, I really feel like millennials are like in such a great position because we've been adopting technology since high school. We're so every few years there's like something that we have to adopt. So I do think
Yeah,
like my generation is ready to adopt and like take it to the next level, but we do need that kind of that leadership buy-in to get
for sure.
there.
For sure, yeah, and I think that I want to jump on one thing that you said there, Kenny, which is kind of that the younger generations are really good at prompting. But I think there's another piece to it in terms of younger generations is that there's just a confidence to like push buttons and see what happens, right? I feel like
Hmm.
older generations, like I literally had a conversation with somebody the other day who we took through 3 training sessions with, and then I
Hmm.
had a follow up, hey, how's it going? Tell me about your journey. Oh, I've used it here and there, but I'm scared to break it,
Hmm.
right? And so there's this fear in older generations that we're going to somehow break the technology, right?
Hmm.
And it just like it just doesn't work that way, right? At all, right? So
Hmm.
I'm curious about one other thing that you said there, and I'm going to ask you guys both this questions. I'm going to start with you, Kenny. But in terms of your peer group and what you're hearing, obviously you guys are working at an organization that's like all in on the AIs, and this is all we do all day, every day, and we're doing a lot. And you mentioned that you have some friends that are like, oh my God, can you teach me and all this kind of stuff. I'm curious from what you're hearing from your peer group, Kendall. Are your peers getting leadership buy-in? Is it a conversation that's happening in their workplaces? Can you give me a bit of a sense on what you're hearing from your friends on that front?
Yeah, I would say the buy-in is more like that's cool that you can do that with AI. Like that'd be neat if we can learn how to do that. But I would say the buy-in isn't okay, like let's figure out how to do this. Let's bring somebody in to teach us. Let's like fully jump on this train. It's kind of like, that's a cool. You did that with AI? Nice. Good job. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? So it's I think supportive but not fully embraced.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Juan? How are your friends working in different various places where their companies are going in, or that these are having, or conversations are being had?
To be honest, not that much. It's kind of like the same thing that Kenny mentioned. Is more like they know that the tools are there, and it's more like a shadow using of AI instead of like conversations happening inside the companies. One of the things that I do think that in general is affecting this is and the different it depends on the industry that we're talking about where we get like, oh, they're fully adopting AI, or they're like early days, or they are like, we know it, but we don't have like, any initiative to get into it. So if we go with the technology ones like marketing agencies, technology companies, and things like that, is like, of course, they need to keep on the loop. But if we go with all industries, like, people management, for example, I have a friend that he works on a company that does cleaning for different places all over the place. And he's like, we don't have any kind of conversations about this because they think that there's not like
A
a
use.
way to use it,
Hmm.
and it's like it's not useful. But then, like, at the end of the day, you can come up with two or three different ideas involving AI that are worth the time to build, and is like you're gonna save X amount of time because you're gonna be using these kind of things. One interesting thing that I saw on the different like adoption that we have is on last Friday where I was on the ER, just different, just to give context. But when the doctor came, he just told me, he was like, hey, I don't know if you mind, I'm going to be recording this and giving this to an AI that's going to help me transcript this. So he had one of those like little lavalier microphones with him. And I was gonna ask like, hey doc, do you have a TikTok or something like that where I can follow you? Like, and then he explained to me the concept of like, hey, we're using an AI to transcribe everything. And I asked him a little bit more, and it was something that is using the technologies that are around the place with their own in-house program because of course, data and security concerns of like patients. But the amount of times that they're gonna save just of the matter of typing what's going on with my patients instead of like something doing it for me at the same time, like while we're talking. So I found it really interesting, and it's a really good example of like how people is getting into it, and how companies are getting into it slowly. But we're gonna get into a place where like full adoption. We, like for people that is in industry that they do think that there's not a really good use for it, of course, there is a really good use to it. So that's something that I just wanted to highlight there. And yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind of.
I think you're kind of pointing to what I see out there is that people still are so early that they don't even understand what the possibilities and the use cases and what sort of the opportunities are. Kenny, you and I talked about we were meeting with a client and they have a fairly large event center, and the person that runs the event center has many meetings with people who we're doing a wedding and it's 300 people and we're having turkey and we're having this and a lot of details and flowers here and this time is this, lots of details, right? And so to sit there and frantically write all those details now down, transcribe them somewhere, make sure they're accurate, all that kind of stuff, versus a tool that can literally just capture the information, put it into like a memo or a brief for the team, and automate a process that everybody knows what to do. I mean, that's a huge, not only is it a time saver, but I think the example you gave, one about the doctor, is like it also saves a lot of mental energy and a lot of mental capacity. I'd rather have my doctor's mental capacity thinking about me and my symptoms in my situation than, oh, I got to go and type all this stuff in, or I got to, you know what I mean, or I got to do all this admin. That's mentally
Mm.
draining, kind of, right? So I think those are cool use cases. So last question before we jump off. I think we can literally sit here and talk for the next 5 hours, but we don't have time for that. So, Kenny, I'm going to put you on the spot. So, what do you think the next 2 to 5 years is going to look like when it comes to AI adoption for your generation and for workplaces in general?
I still see it being relatively slow. I think it's going to be a lot of what we're experiencing now, where people are using it individually, but company-wide adoption or leadership adoption is still maybe like in the next 5 years. I think my generation right now, we are all kind of starting in our careers to move into those leadership roles ourselves. So, maybe in the next 5 years, there could be a pretty big shift because as my generation is moving more into those leadership roles, we're bringing that knowledge, we're bringing that desire to like transform our businesses and embrace the technologies. So I would say, yeah, maybe in the next 5 years, there will be, I think, a shift just as generations are moving. But I think it's still going to be slow and steady. There's still going to be trust. You have things like the new platform that just came out, Deep
DeepSeek, Chinese
DeepSeek.
DeepSeek.
Yeah,
Ipsic.
thank you. Yeah. And so I think there's going to be, these things that just keep coming that people question, trust, security, all those things. But yeah, I have a very positive like mind frame that it's going to become the norm in organizations. I think especially as you mentioned, I think tourism organizations are in such a prime position to be adopting AI because, we are in tourism. I come from a tourism background because we love people. We love talking to people. And even just the example you said there about the convention center, just that small little change allows them to be present, to be interacting, to be in the moment. And I think as like, our visitor economy, especially in Canada, British Columbia, we need to like be offering these great experiences for people and our guests, and utilizing the AI tools available will allow us to do that better. So I'm very hopeful for the next 2 to 5 years.
Juan, what do you think the next couple of years are going to look like here?
Well, I kind of have two visions on that side because, as Kenny said, it's gonna be slow. Sometimes for me, it's kind of hard to understand that things are not moving the way that I'm moving. It's like now we're talking about it, and it's like there is still a lot of companies that are not even interested in AI. There's still a lot of people that is like, oh, I've heard about GPT, and they say like GTP because it's easier to say. But I heard about GPT, and that's it. Like that's the only thing. But because like for me is my new reality of my everyday and my like the thing that I use every day. So I feel that. I'm in a point of like where I feel that it's moving faster than is in reality doing. But of course, it's going to be exponentially growing as an example. And we were talking about this couple weeks ago, and it's like if you see the technology advancements between for example, the 90s and the 2000s and the 2000s and 2010, and 2010 to 2025 is just exponentially growing, and then every single year there's new technology coming, there are new things coming all over the place. So it's going to keep moving like that, right? Like years ago we used to have one or two different phones every 3 years, and they were like BlackBerry just stood up in the market like with the ATA 20, which is the one that I had, as like for 4 years, so like 3 years. But now it's like we have a new phone every single year, and even in less time. So for me, it's gonna be growing. But as Kenny said, in 5 years, it's gonna be kind of like still there. We're gonna still have companies that are gonna be on the early days of adoption. So I feel that is the best moment to jump into this train.
Mhm.
So, like it's still slow, It's not fast. It's not
Early
like,
still, right?
Hmm.
yeah, it's super early. It's on a slow train. Like I feel like it's not even a train that is like moving that
Hmm.
fast. It's just like waiting for people to get in and then start moving slowly. So
Yeah.
this is the moment where professionals, leaders and people in general should be jumping into these new technologies. Of course, there are things that people is afraid of, but like when the first computer came out, they were afraid of different things on the early thousands. So there's going to be a thing every single time that something comes out.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the BlackBerry because actually just yesterday, and I'm not going to name this person's name, but there's somebody in the tourism industry in Alberta who literally had a post on LinkedIn yesterday basically saying, the day has come, I have to get rid of my BlackBerry. And I was like, wow, you really
Wow.
held on for a really long time. Like, good for you. And she was just like,
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, what you guys are both describing, and this is kind of something that Professor Ethan Mullick, who's a professor at the Wharton School of Business, I quote him a lot. He's a really good mind when it comes to this stuff. He talks about the jagged edge of AI adoption. And what that means is obviously some people are going to be way at the forefront, some people are going to be way behind, and it's going to be not just people, but businesses, right? And so I think we're going to see this jagged edge of AI adoption happening at the individual level, at the sort of corporate level. I think there's going to be obviously some companies that are going to be way at the forefront, and some companies that are going to be left behind. I kind of agree with you guys that it'll be humanity ultimately that kind of slows this thing down. But I do think that companies need to get on it because I think that in every kind of industry, you're going to have a few early adopters that are really driving the bus forward and pushing the envelope forward. And I think the gains and the opportunities for those companies are just massive. I mean, I see it for our company. I see what we're building. I see the opportunities. And like we're just getting, I feel like we're still just like scratching the surface of what's possible, right? But so if we're doing all of this stuff and our competitors are not even talking about it, I mean, it's going to be harder and harder for people for companies to keep up if they don't sort of get on the train because the train is moving, right? Now, my other prediction, I guess I'll say, is that I think AI adoption is just going to kind of happen at the same time because every single technology, every single tool we use, every gadget we use is going to have AI baked into it, right? So, we're all using AI whether we think we are or not, right? We all if you use Spotify and it's telling you the next song or DJX or whatever, or all of those things are AI in action, right? Your Google Map. I included a slide about my growing up and I said, I grew up at a time when the map didn't talk back to you, right? But now it talks back to you. That's all artificial intelligence at work, right? So, I think it's just going to be kind of all of a sudden it's going to be everywhere, right? But still, I think there's going to be an adoption curve in the companies and the individuals that sort of take a leadership role are going to see, I think, massive advantages. And I think that sadly, I think that there's going to be companies that are going to cease to exist in the next 3 to 5 years because they either refuse to adopt or they just don't know how to do it well. Anyways, like I said, we could probably talk about this all day, but I think it was a really fun conversation and a good opportunity to introduce Juan and Kendel if you haven't met them yet. They are our two superstars of the Tourism AI Network, and you'll probably be seeing more of them because I'm going to be putting them more front and center and out there. So thanks, guys, for the conversation, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. To learn more about the network or get involved, visit our website at tourismainetwork.com or find us on socials at Tourism AI Network. We'll see you there.